Have you ever been with someone who made you feel something real, only for them to pull away the moment things got close? One day, he's showing up, calling, holding your hand like he never wants to let go. The next, he's guarded, distant, suddenly, not ready for anything serious. It's confusing, it's painful, and it leaves you asking, was any of it real? Here's what I want you to know: yes, it might have been real. But sometimes, when a man's ego is in charge, it silences what his heart is trying to say. His ego wants to stay in control. It wants to protect him from rejection, from getting hurt, from being seen as weak. But the problem is, love requires risk, connection requires courage. So what do you do when his ego hides what his heart feels? How do you protect yourself in the face of someone else's emotional confusion? Let's talk about that. When a man pulls away emotionally, becomes distant, or stops expressing what he once showed so clearly, it's easy to assume he's lost interest. And sometimes, yes, that's exactly what it means. But not always. In many cases, what looks like coldness or detachment isn't indifference. It's fear of vulnerability, of rejection, of not being enough. And for many men, that fear doesn't come out as a confession. It comes out as silence, withdrawal, hot and cold behavior that leaves you wondering what you did wrong, when really it's about what he can't handle feeling. This fear is often deeply conditioned. From a young age, a lot of men are taught that emotions make them weak. They're praised for being stoic, logical, composed. Vulnerability, that's something to keep hidden, even from themselves. So when they actually feel something meaningful, when they meet someone who touches them deeply, it triggers a conflict. On one hand, their heart is responding. They feel the connection. They're drawn in. On the other, their ego rushes in with alarms. Don't get too close. Don't lose control. Don't give anyone the power to hurt you. So instead of leaning in, they hold back. They minimize. They rationalize. They say things like, I don't want anything serious. Even while they're texting you good morning and making plans for the weekend, they tell themselves and you that they're just not ready or not in the right place in life, while still acting like someone who's falling. It's a way of self-protection, because admitting they care, that they could fall, means admitting they might get hurt. For someone who hasn't done the inner work to feel safe being vulnerable, these emotions can be terrifying. Caring deeply makes them feel out of control, and for many men, that's a threat to their sense of identity. The ego wants to be in charge. It wants to maintain power, autonomy, safety, and love. Real love requires surrender. It demands that we drop the mask, risk rejection, and show someone who we really are. That's terrifying for anyone, but especially for someone who's learned that emotional exposure is dangerous. The truth is, when a man's ego is stronger than his emotional self-awareness, you'll often see this pattern. He shows affection when it feels safe or when he's in control of the dynamic, but retreats the moment intimacy deepens. You might find yourself constantly wondering where you stand, confused by the inconsistency, because his behavior shows you he cares, but his words or distance make you doubt it. That's the contradiction of someone whose heart feels more their ego is willing to admit. This doesn't mean you should excuse poor behavior or tolerate emotional unavailability. Understanding the fear behind it isn't an invitation to stay in a confusing or unbalanced situation, but it can offer you clarity. It helps you see that his silence, his withdrawal, or his hesitations may not mean a lack of feelings, but rather a lack of emotional tools. He may want to love, but not know how to show up for love when it matters most. So when you're dealing with someone who seems to hide what they feel, remember this: their silence might be fear in disguise. But you are not responsible for coaxing feelings out of someone who's unwilling to face their own. Compassion is valuable, but so is your clarity. If his ego is louder than his heart, you'll always be chasing an emotional connection that feels just out of reach. When a man is emotionally conflicted, one of the clearest signs is the gap between what he says and what he does. He might sit across from you, and say he's not looking for anything serious, but then spend every weekend with you, open up about his fears, introduce you to his friends, and call you the second something big happens in his life. That contradiction is confusing, and it's supposed to be. It keeps you on the line, wondering if maybe he just doesn't know how to say he loves you yet, or if he's scared, or maybe he just needs more time. But here's the truth: ego speaks in logic, in self-preservation, in boundaries that protect him from the discomfort of vulnerability. Love, on the other hand, speaks in behavior. It shows up in how someone treats you when no one's watching, in the little ways they prioritize you without needing to explain it. A lot of people, especially men who aren't emotionally attuned, don't even realize they're sending mixed signals. They genuinely believe they're being honest when they say they don't want anything serious. But the way they behave, that's often driven by something deeper and more instinctive. Their heart pulls them closer, their ego pulls them back. So they end up doing what feels good in the moment, being affectionate, being present, or building intimacy, while still maintaining the emotional out they gave themselves with their words. This is why so many women end up feeling stuck in situationships, because the logic side of their partner has made a declaration: I'm not ready for a relationship. But the emotional side keeps showing up like someone who already is in one. And if you're someone who leads with empathy, you may start to see his internal conflict and try to resolve it for him. You'll give him space, try to be understanding, not push too hard. But in doing so, you start bending your own emotional needs to match what his ego is comfortable with, instead of responding to what his heart is doing. It's important to recognize that this dissonance is not romantic. It's not a story of a man who's slowly coming around. More often, it's a man caught between desire and fear, connection and control. His ego is terrified of losing power, of being too seen, of needing someone. So even as his heart reaches out, his ego insists on keeping things casual, undefined, or emotionally distant. The result, you feel like you're in a relationship that doesn't exist on paper, like you're building something real that only one of you is willing to name. The challenge is, as human beings, we often listen more to words than actions when it suits our hopes. We latch on to what we want to believe, that he just needs time, that his behavior means something deeper. But the more you ignore that inner misalignment, the more you end up investing in potential, not reality. And potential never holds you at night. Potential doesn't commit. Potential keeps you waiting for someone to grow into the kind of love they're already pretending to give you in pieces. To navigate this, you have to look clearly at the behavior. Does he consistently show up? Is his effort aligned with your values, not just your feelings? If his actions say, I care, but his ego-driven logic says, don't get close, that's not a relationship. It's an emotional illusion. No matter how much chemistry or connection exists, love without accountability becomes confusion. And you deserve more than mixed messages. You deserve clarity, consistency, and someone whose heart is not just felt, but shown in every part of how they treat you. When you care about someone who seems emotionally blocked, it's natural to want to help them open up. You see the glimpses of their heart, the way they look at you when they think you're not watching, the softness in their voice when they let their guard down, the moments when their real feelings accidentally slip through. It's easy to convince yourself that if you just love them enough, stay patient enough, prove you're safe enough, they'll eventually reveal what's really going on inside. But when his ego keeps building walls, it doesn't matter how much of his heart you sense. You can't build a relationship on potential. You're not meant to be the one who draws his hidden emotions to the surface. You're meant to receive what someone willingly offers, not excavate what they refuse to show. It's one of the hardest lessons in love, especially when you're someone who sees the best in people. You believe in emotional growth, in being supportive, in the idea that with time, care, and understanding, people can change. And while that's true in some cases, it becomes dangerous when it turns into a pattern over-functioning for someone emotionally unavailable. You start doing the emotional heavy lifting. You try to read between every line of what he says, decode the meaning behind his silences, and become the translator for his behavior. In doing that, you're not just trying to reach his heart. You're losing touch with your own needs in the process. This is where you have to get really honest with yourself. Are you in love with him? Or are you in love with the version of him you're hoping to reach? Because if someone's ego is constantly hiding their feelings, if they're always in control, never vulnerable, never truly showing up emotionally, then you're not in a relationship with the full person. You're in a dynamic where you're carrying both people's emotional responsibility. And that's exhausting. We often tell ourselves stories to justify this kind of connectioning. He's been through a lot. He just doesn't know how to express himself. He's afraid of being hurt. And all of that might be true, but none of it changes the fact that he is choosing to stay behind a wall. It's not your job to take a battering ram to that wall in hopes of reaching his buried feelings. You're not his therapist. You're not his healer. You're not his emotional translator. You're someone with a heart of your own that also deserves to be seen, nurtured, and valued without having to prove your worth through effort. It's also important to recognize that emotional growth has to come from within. You can model vulnerability, you can communicate clearly, and you can hold space, but you can't force someone to meet you there. When his ego is louder than his emotional courage, he may want intimacy, but still push it away. And it's not because you did something wrong. It's because some people are more comfortable in control than in connection. A relationship that requires you to constantly guess, hope, or wait is not a stable foundation for love. You deserve someone who doesn't make you work for crumbs of emotion. Someone who doesn't just occasionally let their heart peek out, but shows up with it fully. When someone is emotionally ready, you won't have to break down their walls. They'll open the door themselves. And when they don't, it's not your job to stand outside waiting. It's your job to walk where love flows freely, not where it's locked behind silence. When someone is navigating a relationship from their ego, they tend to prioritize pride, control, and self-protection. The ego's primary goal is to avoid discomfort. It wants to stay one step ahead, avoid rejection, and maintain the upper hand. In contrast, love operates in the opposite direction. Love requires risk, vulnerability, and mutual surrender. It asks that we let go of control and move toward connection, even when it feels uncertain or scary. When you're with someone whose ego is still in the driver's seat, you'll feel that imbalance. Their heart may be present somewhere in the background, but it never truly leads. And if their ego is the one steering your relationship, love doesn't get a real chance to grow. This shows up in all kinds of subtle ways. Maybe he avoids talking about feelings, or he keeps everything light even when the relationship starts to deepen. Maybe he's competitive in a way that feels off, like he needs to win, even in small emotional moments. Maybe he acts like caring too much is weakness, or mocks emotional conversations, or dismisses your need for clarity as being too intense. In all of these scenarios, what you're seeing is someone prioritizing the protection of their ego over the expression of genuine connection. Ego is driven by fear of rejection, fear of being hurt, fear of losing control, so it keeps people guarded. It makes them focus on self-image. It pushes them to stay emotionally detached, even when their heart is quietly pulling them in another direction. And when you're in a relationship with someone who's ruled by that fear, it can feel like you're stuck trying to love someone who won't fully let you in. You can sense that they care, but you can also feel them constantly pulling back. Not because the connection isn't real, but because they're more loyal to self-protection than to emotional honesty. You might find yourself constantly trying to read signals, decode behavior, or earn just enough trust to get them to open up. But the harder you work to create closeness, the more you may notice that they respond by retreating even further. That's because ego sees vulnerability as a threat. If he's not ready to relinquish his emotional defenses, he will keep you at a distance, no matter how good your connection feels. And here's the truth: when someone is still letting ego lead, love always takes a back seat. One of the clearest signs of emotional readiness is the willingness to show up even when it's uncomfortable. When a man is emotionally available, he doesn't avoid hard conversations. He leans into them. He may still have fears, but he doesn't let those fears govern how he treats you. His actions reflect his heart, not his ego. He knows that love isn't about winning, having the last word, or keeping the upper hand. It's about meeting in the middle, owning your feelings, and being brave enough to be seen. That's what you deserve. You deserve someone whose heart leads louder than his pride. Someone who doesn't shrink from intimacy the moment things get real. Someone who doesn't treat emotional closeness like a game of control or like something to be earned through perfect behavior. Because love doesn't thrive where ego rules. It thrives where humility, honesty, and emotional maturity are present. You can't force someone to put their ego aside, but you can choose not to keep lowering yourself to meet it. The right person will understand that protecting the relationship matters more than protecting their pride, and the way to be willing to let go of control to build something truly real with you. When someone gives you mixed signals, warm and affectionate one day, then cold and distant the next, it's hard not to take it personally. It feels like emotional whiplash. One moment they're making plans for the future, looking at you like you're the only person in the room. The next, they're pulling back, taking longer to reply, acting vague or emotionally unavailable. That inconsistency creates confusion, self-doubt, and anxiety. You begin to question your own instincts. Was I imagining the connection? Did I come on too strong? But often, mixed signals don't come from manipulation. They come from feelings that have been pushed down, from emotions that are trying to surface, but aren't fully welcome in the person experiencing them. When a man has deep feelings but hasn't learned how to face or express them, they don't disappear. They leak out in unpredictable ways. One day, he might give in to what his heart feels and lean into closeness. But then, as soon as that intimacy feels too real, too exposing, his ego kicks in and tells him to retreat. Not because the feelings weren't genuine, but because they've crossed an internal threshold that feels unsafe to him. He gets scared of losing control. He gets scared of needing you, of depending on someone emotionally, of what might happen if he lets his guard down. So instead of staying consistent, he oscillates between affection and withdrawal. That push and pull isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of his inner conflict. It's important to understand that emotional suppression doesn't make the feelings go away. It just buries them deeper. And when feelings are buried, they don't express themselves in clean, straightforward ways. They come out sideways. Through mood swings, hot and cold behavior, or emotional detachment that shows up at the most inconvenient times, usually right after a moment of closeness. You might notice that he pulls away right after a really great weekend together, or that he becomes emotionally distant just after being vulnerable. That's not a coincidence. That's emotional repression at work. To you, it feels like you're being punished for getting close. But to him, closeness feels like danger, not because you are dangerous, but because closeness means risking rejection, abandonment, or loss of control, things that his ego is determined to avoid. So he creates space, not because he wants to hurt you, but because he's trying to regulate something he doesn't know how to name. But in doing so, he ends up creating exactly what he fears: distance, disconnection, and relational instability. The problem is that when someone hasn't dealt with their own emotional fear, they end up projecting that fear onto the relationship. You become the trigger, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're stirring something real in them. And real, for someone who's been emotionally guarded most of their life, can feel overwhelming. They like you. They may even love you. But they haven't yet developed the emotional capacity to sit with that love. So they default to what feels safe: silence, avoidance, pulling away, or acting like they don't care. None of this excuses the behavior, but it helps explain it. It helps you see that you're not crazy for feeling a deep connection, and you're not at fault for someone else's emotional confusion. What you're experiencing isn't a lack of feeling, but a lack of emotional maturity. And while you can have compassion for someone struggling with their emotions, it's not your job to hold space for inconsistent behavior that leaves you doubting yourself. Mixed signals may come from suppressed feelings, but love that is ready, open, and grounded doesn't leave you guessing. It shows up clearly and it chooses you fully. Every time. Peace that comes when you're with someone who is emotionally ready. You don't have to second guess what they're feeling. You don't have to overanalyze texts, decode silences, or wonder if you're too much for them. You don't feel like you're constantly trying to unlock a guarded heart. Instead, there's a steadiness, a quiet confidence in the way they show up, not perfectly, but honestly. A man who is ready doesn't let his ego stand in the way of connection. He might still have fears, because we all do, but he doesn't let those fears control the relationship. He doesn't let pride win over presence. The truth is, every relationship reaches a point where vulnerability is required. It's the moment where things get real, where masks come off, where emotional honesty matters more than comfort. And in that moment, someone who is not ready will retreat behind ego. They'll distance themselves, blame timing, say they're not in the right place, or suddenly become hard to reach. But someone who is emotionally ready will lean in. Even if it scares them, they'll choose to be present, because they know that love isn't about having it all figured out. It's about being willing to figure it out together. The right guy isn't the one who never feels fear. It's the one who acknowledges that fear, but still chooses you. He doesn't play games to protect his pride. He doesn't pretend not to care so he can feel powerful. He doesn't ghost you or go cold just to avoid difficult conversations. Instead, he shows up, even when it's hard, even when it means having uncomfortable talks, even when it means facing parts of himself he's still working on. That's what emotional maturity looks like. Not perfection, but consistency. Not certainty, but commitment to trying. You won't have to fight for reassurance with someone like that. You won't be stuck trying to prove your worth or earn love through patience and silence. His heart will be visible, not hidden. He'll tell you how he feels, not just through words, but through follow-through. He'll respect your time, your boundaries, your emotional needs. And more than anything, he won't make you feel like love is a puzzle you have to solve. When someone lets their ego lead, they constantly seek control. They'll hold back just enough to stay in power. They'll say they care, but act detached. They'll use emotional distance as a way to feel safe. But when someone leads with their heart, they aren't afraid to be seen. They aren't afraid to say, "I care about you," and mean it with their actions. They're not worried about losing power because they're not playing power games to begin with. It's easy to get caught up in the intensity of a connection where you're always chasing after clarity. It can feel exciting, even addictive, trying to reach someone emotionally unavailable. But real love doesn't create emotional chaos. It creates safety. The right man won't let ego block his ability to love you. He'll be able to sit with you in the uncomfortable moments. He'll be able to hear feedback without shutting down. He'll make space for your feelings and share his own without needing to win or stay in control. That kind of love doesn't need decoding. It's not hidden behind walls or buried under fear. It's felt, spoken, lived. And once you experience it, you realize how much emotional labor you were doing before. You realize love isn't supposed to be about convincing someone to show up. It's about being met fully by someone who already has. The truth is, love isn't meant to be a guessing game. It's not meant to leave you anxious, overthinking, or constantly questioning your worth. If someone's ego is still running the show, if they're too afraid to be vulnerable, too guarded to be real, you'll always feel like you're chasing something that never quite arrives. But you are not here to beg for breadcrumbs of affection. You're not here to wait on someone to maybe love you once they get out of their own way. You are here for the kind of connection that shows up fully, that speaks clearly, that absence that makes you feel like you have to prove yourself worthy of being loved. When a man is ready, truly ready, his ego won't block the path to his heart. He won't hide behind excuses, pride, or silence. He'll make it known, not just in what he says, but in how he shows up for you. Consistently, intentionally, and without fear of being seen. So don't waste your energy trying to break through someone's walls. Let someone meet you with their heart open. Let love be a space where both people are willing, not just to feel, but to show those feelings with courage and clarity. Because that's what real love looks like. And that's what you deserve.